high-ranking gang figure Troy Fornaciari has pleaded guilty to gun and drug charges in Wollongong local court. In Australia's criminal underworld, where reputation is power and fear is law, Fornaciari's face was his flag. No one carried that flag more defiantly than he did. He was more than a man. He was a statement. His tattooed body served as a public declaration of defiance, rebellion, and pain. Yet behind the ink and the presidency of a notorious motorcycle club lies a far more human and therefore more tragic story. It began with a single childhood trauma, a defining moment that shattered his trust in the world and set him on a collision course with violence and infamy. This is the story of a meteoric rise and a spectacular fall. A man who reached the peak of outlaw power only to be undone by his own anger, targeted for assassination by rivals, and saved from death not by protection, but by sheer coincidence when his car broke down. Part 1. The scar that came first. Before the tattoos, before the hard stare, there was just a boy named Troy. Born in 1984, his early life had nothing to do with guns or gangs. The turning point came when his father died suddenly of a heart attack. According to later psychological reports presented in court, the family's desperate call for help was allegedly dismissed by emergency services as a prank. No ambulance arrived. For young Troy, it was more than the loss of a parent. It was proof that the system could not be trusted. The institutions meant to protect and serve had failed utterly. Psychologists have identified this as the origin of his deep contempt for authority and his lifelong belief that he was truly on his own. In the years that followed, Troy's life became a search for structure in a chaotic world. For a time, he sought discipline through army training, hoping to find direction. But the rigid, conformist structure of military life clashed with his growing defiance. He left soon after, disillusioned and adrift. By 18, he had found a new kind of structure among people who lived outside society's rules. In that world, loyalty, suspicion of outsiders, and the belief that power comes from violence became his new guiding principles. Part 2. The Living Manifesto. The outlaw motorcycle world didn't just welcome Troy Fornaciari, it reflected him. It offered the strict hierarchy and brotherhood his life had been missing. He joined the Finks Motorcycle Club and embraced its code completely. Driven by ambition and a growing ruthlessness, he rose rapidly through the ranks. By his early 30s, he had become president of the South Coast chapter, based in Wollongong's industrial heartland. As president, he oversaw a criminal network involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and violent enforcement across the Illawarra region. But his rise was marked by more than criminal success. It was accompanied by a radical transformation of his own image. Over 4 years, he turned his face and body into a living symbol of defiance. Across his cheek, he tattooed the words "not guilty," a permanent sneer at the justice system. On his eyelids, "tough look," a challenge to anyone who met his eyes. Misspelled phrases like "in God's hands" appeared on his chin, while his forehead bore Gothic script and symbols. According to the Daily Mail, this was deliberate self-branding, a form of armor that made him instantly recognizable and intimidating. Yet it was also a prison. His appearance made anonymity impossible. He could never hide, never find regular work, never return quietly to ordinary life. He had made himself an eternal outsider. Part 3. The King's Gambit. The illusion of invincibility collapsed on the morning of February 1st, 2018. In a coordinated police operation codenamed Redknapp, heavily armed officers raided the fortified Finks clubhouse in North Wollongong. Inside, they found a .22 caliber rifle fitted with a homemade silencer, a weapon designed for assassination, not self-defense, along with a stolen Toyota Hilux and various gang materials. Fornaciari, then 34, was arrested with a younger associate, Jake Smith. The most serious charge was directing the activities of a criminal group, formally recognizing his role as a gang leader. The case also drew attention to an earlier 2017 incident that revealed his volatility. When an associate crashed a Harley-Davidson he had lent him, Fornaciari responded not with concern but with violence, assaulting the injured man in full view of paramedics. The situation became so dangerous that medical staff barricaded themselves inside their ambulance for safety. To Troy, respect for the club's property outweighed all else, including decency and the law. By May 2019, faced with overwhelming evidence, he changed his plea and admitted guilt. He pleaded guilty to a reduced set of charges, and in court an unexpected version of Troy Fornaciari appeared. He was remorseful, subdued, and spoke of wanting to change. He expressed embarrassment over his tattoos and a desire to start over. His lawyer pointed to ongoing psychiatric treatment and medication as helping him find clarity and stability. The magistrate sentenced him to 3 years and 6 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 2 years and 6 months. While acknowledging Troy's apparent remorse, the court remained cautiously skeptical. The magistrate urged him to follow through with rehabilitation and to remove the tattoos and the ideology they represented. For a brief moment it seemed possible that his story might turn toward redemption, but the pull of the underworld is strong, and its call soon proved impossible to resist. Part 4. The Unraveling, Meth, Mayhem, and a Hospital Siege. By 2022, the promises made in the courtroom had long faded. Troy was not only back in the criminal world, he had plunged into its most violent and chaotic chapter yet. New allegations emerged of a kidnapping in Lake Heights, where 2 women were allegedly abducted and held over underworld debts. Fornaciari was accused of using intimidation and threats to enforce payment. Police later uncovered the clearest evidence of his return to crime purely by accident. Detectives in Lake Illawarra, monitoring a smaller drug dealer, discovered through intercepted calls that Troy was the real supplier, the source behind the operation. Over a 3-week period in April 2022, police surveillance documented the distribution of 238 grams of methamphetamine, worth approximately $56,000, under his direction. The recordings captured not only the transactions, but also the complaints of customers frustrated with poor product quality and unreliable service. Signs not of a sophisticated empire, but of a desperate and unstable operation on the edge of collapse. This chaos was backed by brutal violence. On May 13, 2022, in Dapto, Troy and a 21-year-old associate, Kai Epps, confronted fellow dealer Paul McKinnon over a $65,000 debt. The attack was savage, leaving McKinnon with a severe head injury that required hospital treatment. The intimidation didn't end there. Troy later appeared outside Wollongong Hospital, where McKinnon was being treated, issuing further threats toward his associates and family. It was a chilling display meant to show that nowhere was safe, not even a hospital. Days later, police arrested Fornaciari at an apartment in Liverpool. The charges were among the most serious he had ever faced: commercial drug supply, wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and intimidation. Bail was denied. The man who had once promised a fresh start now faced his past all over again, this time from behind bars. Part 5. The Dodged Bullet, a conspiracy foiled by fate. While in custody in 2023, a startling revelation came to light, one that redefined his entire story and illustrated how close he had come to death. In early 2018, at the height of his power, Troy Fornaciari had been marked for assassination. Damien Featherstone, leader of a resurgent Brothers for Life gang in the Illawarra, had orchestrated a detailed plan to kill him. Wiretapped conversations captured Featherstone mocking Troy and instructing his lieutenants, including Andrew Coe, to obtain firearms. The plan was simple but deadly. Lure Fornaciari out of his fortified clubhouse with a fake offer to buy a gold ring, then ambush him in central Wollongong. The hit team set out, armed and ready, but fate intervened in an almost absurd way. Their car broke down. The mechanical failure stranded the would-be assassins and halted the plan. They intended to regroup and try again, but time ran out. Just days later, police launched Operation Redknapp, the raid that led to Fornaciari's arrest on firearm charges. Ironically, the very operation that imprisoned him also saved his life. He told police at the time that he believed Brothers for Life wanted him dead. And he was right. His survival came not from cunning or strength, but from a dead battery or a failed alternator. Featherstone and his associates were eventually arrested, their assassination plot exposed. The episode stands as a stark reminder of the random, unpredictable nature of life and death in the criminal world. Part 6, The Final Sentence, Ink and Incarceration. With the assassination plot now part of his legend, Troy's fate was finally sealed in March 2024. After pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for commercial drug supply and the violent assault on Paul McKinnon. With time already served, he became eligible for parole in June 2025. Once again, Troy Fornaciari stands at a crossroads. The promises of reform he made in 2019 proved hollow. The tattoos he once claimed to regret remain unaltered, a permanent record of the life he could not abandon. At this point, the question is no longer about his crimes. Those are well documented. The question is about the man himself. Can an identity built so fiercely around rebellion and violence ever be dismantled? Or is he forever imprisoned by the image he created for the world and for himself? His life is a stark illustration of how childhood trauma can ripple through an entire existence, shaping choices and defining destinies. It is a story without closure, leaving only the question of whether redemption is still possible, or whether some paths simply cannot be undone. Troy Fornaciari's life stands as an unsettling reminder of how a single tragic moment can distort the course of a lifetime. It forces us to consider where understanding ends and accountability begins, and whether true freedom can ever be achieved by someone trapped within their own creation. The gavel has fallen on his case, but the final judgment on his legacy remains open. If you are drawn to these deep, often dark explorations of the human condition, stories of power, trauma, and transformation, stay with us for the next investigation. Thank you for your time and your curiosity. Stay vigilant